again. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here in the first thing Monday morning. At least that we have a better weather than compared to last week, so that's going for us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yuki Tatsumi. I'm a co-director of East Asia program and director of Japan program at Stimson. And for those of you who are joining us online, welcome. I'm glad you're joining virtually. Every year since 2013, Stimson has the privilege of collaborating with the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. on a project called Views from Next Generation. Usually what we do is we identify the topic that we think is going to be important for the U.S. Japan alliance and really a much broader U.S. Japan relationship over that given year, and try to actually recruit up-and-coming researchers who are very capable but has not yet had a chance to debut in DC policy community, and hopefully use that for them to use this opportunity as a springboard to be more actively engaged in the DC policy debate and also in Tokyo. So this year we have a wonderful lineup of such experts, and we have a very distinguished discussant who is willing to support their effort. So I will introduce each and every one of them very quickly on the order of who's sitting closest to me. So immediately to my right, he's known to you all. We have a distinct privilege of having General David Berger, previous Commandant of the Marine Corps, but he also is a SAIS alum, and it's in that supportive spirit of a SAIS alum that he had graciously agreed to spend next 90 minutes with us. He already read everybody's commentaries from the authors, so I will give him he will have the privilege of asking everybody the first question and add his own thoughts along the way after everybody gives a summary of their own commentary. So thank you, General, for joining us this morning. Next to him is Ms. Mizumi Dutcher. She is currently a master's for public policy student, doctor. I'm so sorry, that's a travesty. She's a PhD student in the Johns Hopkins SAIS. Previously, she had spent many years in the journalism, but she wanted to go into the public policy realm, so she did that career hop. And she actually does have internship experience working at Representative Ami Bera's office. I asked her to write her policy memo on what the role that the U.S. Congress can play in terms of giving a little bit of a stability and hopefully the predictability for the U.S. foreign policy and security policy, or especially for the Indo-Pacific, but more broadly over the next 4 years. Next to Mizumi is Haruka Satake. She recently went back to Japan, but before then, she was a research fellow at the Johns Hopkins SAIS. So see how we're all lining up with SAIS people, because I'm also a SAIS grad, so I'm a little bit leaning toward that way. But before then, she gained a master's at the George Washington University. And I asked her to take a holistic view of the U.S.-Japan alliance and put them in a global context in this quite unpredictable world. And joining us online is Mr. Hirohito Ogi. He is a research fellow at the Institute of Geoeconomics based in Tokyo. He is the former Minister of Defense official, but he also decided to pursue a public policy interest. So I asked him to touch upon the topic that no one is probably better qualified in Japan today to do so, which is the ongoing debate on the U.S.-Japan defense relations, with this particular focus on the upgrading, modernizing, and streaming of their command and control structure. So the run of the show is I'll first turn to Haruka, who say a few words about the commentaries. By the way, all these 3 commentaries will be available online. Ogi-san's already is. Haruka's is about to be released in the next few days, and Mizumi's piece is following not too long after that. So I'll turn to Haruka first, and who would probably start with a little bit more broad overview of U.S. Japan alliance and the global context in this new year under the new leadership in both capitals. Then turn to Hirohito about a little bit more specific, focused discussion on the C2 modernization effort. And I will wrap it up by going to Mizumi last, who will discuss, like I said, the role that he sees that Congress can play. Then I'll turn to General Berger, who will add his own thought, and then he will exercise his privilege as a discussant to ask the question to each one of the author. And after that interaction, I'll open up the floor. For the question and answer, you all saw the little card on the QR code. For those of you who are joining us in-house, please do scan that and type in your questions using your cell phone, and it'll come straight here, and I go through them. And for online audience, I think you already have the way to type in your questions as well. So they all both come here. So I will go through those questions, as many as possible, and the remainder of those time. So with that, good morning, everyone, again. And without a further ado, I'll yield the floor to Haruka.
Yeah, so hello, everybody. It's my honor to be here at Simson today. My name is Haruka. I'm a former research fellow of the U.S. Japan think tank. And I really appreciate Director Yuki Tatsumi for providing great opportunity to me at this great event. So I'm writing the paper is titled The U.S. Japan Alliance. So at the recent U.S. Japan summit between U.S. President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, the two countries reaffirmed the importance of the Japan and U.S. alliance while recognizing the complex challenges it faces, including geostrategic rivalries, economic security risk, and intensifying technological competitions. Despite these challenges, the alliance remains the cornerstone of the Indo-Pacific security and has broadened the scope beyond traditional defense cooperation to encompass the artificial intelligence, AI, space, and supply chain resilience, reflecting the two nations' shared strategic priorities. By enhancing cooperation through the fair and mutually beneficial collaboration, these two countries' alliance can strengthen the regional and global stability to promote shared prosperity and security. Particular technological advancements have come to increasingly drive U.S.-Japan cooperation, especially in the areas of emerging technology, including the AI, space, and cybersecurity. For instance, the two countries look to expand collaborative research and development in these areas with applicants across civilians and defense sector as the Japanese government, increasing defense budget investment in these technologies. In space domain, for especially the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, NASA, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA, are deepening cooperation of satellite deployments and space situations awareness, contributing to both scientific progress and regional security, including addressing risks related to the anti-satellite capabilities. Moreover, cybersecurity collaborations has also intensified, with both countries sharing the threats intelligence to respond to mechanism and enhancing the resilience of the critical infrastructure across these sectors. However, broader strategic challenges still remains. One of the biggest challenges in the U.S.-Japan alliances is ensuring smooth coordination in responding to both regional and global security threats. While the two countries share a broader strategic vision, their immediate security concerns don't always align. For Japan, for example, the primary focus remains on threats close to home, including North Korea's missile developments, potential crisis in Taiwan Straits, and maintaining deterrence in the Pacific. Meanwhile, U.S. has deeply engaged in the conflicts beyond the regions, such as the war in Ukraine and ongoing crisis in Gaza. Because of this, these can be gap in policy coordinations, making it harder for alliance to present a unified front in addressing multiple security challenges at the same time. Another challenge is the growing expectation for Japan to take a bigger regional security role. Since the release of its National Security Strategy, NSS, in 2022, Japan has committed to increasing defense spending and strengthening its military capability. However, these arise an important questions. How much Japan can realistically contribute? There are still limitations, especially when it's come to collective security operation, intelligence sharing, and defense coordination in crisis situations. Japan's constitutional reflection, particularly the interpretation of Article 9, continue to make it difficult for a country to project military force beyond its immediate regions. While Japan is taking steps in enhancing defense posture, the U.S. ought to carefully manage its expectations. Overbuilding Japan's with excessive security demands could not only strain the alliance, but also trigger the domestic political backlash. The third one is economic tension between U.S. and Japan also pose a challenge. While both countries are prioritizing economic security, focusing on supply chain resilience, industry security, and countering economic coercion policy differences remain. In the recent U.S. Japan summit, Prime Minister Ishiba announced the Japanese investment in the U.S. $1 trillion and also purchased the U.S. LNG. U.S. side, on the other hand, the goal is to maintaining the trade deficit with Japan, and if it is not achieved, new tariff measure will be introduced. The United States currently levies 2.5% tariff on imported Japanese automobiles and technology products, which has sparked a concern in Tokyo about potential economic disruptions. Lastly, uncertainty about the U.S. foreign policy under the second Trump administration adds another layer of complexities. Japan has to navigate the shifting policy landscape, particularly following the announcement by Secretary of State Marco Rubio that the U.S. will cut the foreign development assistance and shut down U.S. aid, with its function being absorbed in the State Department. This could not create new challenges in how Japan and the U.S. coordinate their global development efforts. Going forward, both countries will need to adapt to these evolving challenges while ensuring that the alliances remain strong, resilient, and global issues effectively. To ensure the long-term stability and effectiveness of the U.S.-Japan alliance, I would state the three key policy recommendations. First, deepening cooperations in emerging technology and cybersecurity. The U.S. and Japan have a unique opportunity to strengthen their technological and cybersecurity cooperations, not only for their own security, but also to support regional stability in Indo-Pacific and beyond. One way to achieve this is by creating a joint AI and cybersecurity fund that helps other countries improve their cyber defense and promotes the responsible use of AI. Another area for closer collaboration is space governance. Both countries can work together through international platforms like United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space to align the space technology with other security needs, such as maritime security, disaster response, and regional connectivity. By doing so, the Japan and U.S. alliance can enhance its leadership role in shaping a secure and innovative global technological environment. The second one is to strengthen regional and institutional framework through the dialogue. Given the increasing geopolitical uncertainties in the Indo-Pacific, it is essential for the U.S. and Japan to invest more in the dialogue-based regional frameworks, such as the Quad and ASEAN-led platforms. These frameworks play a crucial role in fostering trust and cooperations, not only in traditional security issues, but also in emerging challenges like cyber threats, health crisis, and climate change. For Japan's priority dialogue provides an opportunity to lead in non-military areas such as climate actions and digital innovations. For the United States, strengthening the diplomatic engagement help reaffirm its global leadership and a commitment to multilateralism. A focus on regional dialogue will also enhance the cooperation with the key partners like South Korea, India, and ASEAN countries, creating new opportunity for joint initiative in infrastructure, and the U.S.-Japan can contribute a more stable and integral and resilience in the Pacific. The third one, lastly, ensuring transparent communication and stable alliance management. With the political transitions underway in the both countries, including the second Trump administration in the U.S. and the potential for Ishiba administration in Japan, maintaining institutional stability will be critical for keeping alliance strong. This requires consistent high-level dialogue, such as 2+2 ministerial meeting, as well as sustainable trilateral and multilateral cooperation frameworks. The goal should be to ensure that alliance management is driven for a long-term strategic objective rather than a short-term political shift. Under the current U.S. administrations, American First and American First have become the key principle of the foreign policy. As Secretary of State Mark Rubio stated in his confirmation hearing, the guidance question for U.S. foreign policy is, does this approach make the U.S. stronger, safer, or more prosperous? To maintain strong ties, Japan ought to craft its messaging in a way that allies with these priorities, while also safeguarding its own national interest. At the same time, Japan should also demonstrate how the U.S.-Japan alliance directly benefits to the both country, particularly by ensuring the regional stability, fostering economic growth, and driving technological innovations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Haruka. Ogi-san, you're up.
Thank you for having me here, and I'm very much honored to speak in front of all of you, especially in front of the General Bagger. I was studying a lot from your initiative in U.S. Marine Corps. So my commentary was already uploaded on the website of the Stimson Center, but I decided to slightly change the structure and focus of my statement, primarily because last week, about a week ago, we got a news report, the leak report, that the US DoD is thinking about the suspension of the planned upgrade of US Forces Japan from the administrative command to the joint operational command. Is reportedly part of the initiative to rationalize U.S. combatant commands, both in the U.S. homeland and abroad. So this news is very much surprising to me and probably to many other Japanese, because about a month ago, in February, Prime Minister Ishiba and President Trump met together and issued a joint statement, and both leaders confirmed to upgrade the respective command and control framework of U.S. and Japanese forces. So I think the U.S. government, especially Secretary of State, Defense, Mr. Hegseth, is planning to visit Tokyo in 5 days. So I hope that he could explain what is going on within the U.S. government to his counterpart, the Defense Minister Nakatani, I pretty much worry about this would signal the wrong message to the countries of concern, such as China, Russia, and North Korea, about the possible retrenchment of U.S. global interests, including that of the Indo-Pacific. But having said that, I think the planned upgrade of USFJ has an inherent vulnerability and weakness to be exploited by the rationalization effort by DOGE, because it is a very complicated issue. And the primary reason, I believe, is that U.S. forces, especially the individual service command component forces, have multiple very much important roles in the region. This is stationing in Japan for not only for the defense of Japan, but also for the security of the Korean Peninsula and Taiwan Strait and the defense of the Philippines. So to ensure the greater flexibility in the wider Western Pacific area, especially for the Navy-led operations. I think having an intermediate joint operational command in Japan may not be welcomed by the Indo-PACOM and the naval component located in Japan. I could understand that point, but at the same time, for the Japanese perspective, and if the United States wants to exploit Japan's enhancing defense capabilities, including its effort to build the standoff defense capabilities, the bilateral coordination is very much important to increase the effectiveness of the bilateral joint missions, including the integrated joint strikes and joint tracking and joint targeting. So there will be some trade-off between these two mutually contradicting but very much important objectives. So how to manage these two objectives is the matter, and whether or not the US DoD decides to suspend the upgrade of the USFJ, we at least need to clarify, and the Japanese side want the US side to clarify the standard standard C2 relationship between individual service commands located in Japan and the upgraded or the non-upgraded USFJ, and also with other regional commands such as USFK and the Indo-PACOM itself. Without that, there will be confusion having multiple coordination lines between the newly established Japanese Joint Operational Command JJOC and the USFJ and Indo-PACOM and other service component commands. So that sort of the clarification should be conducted with the coordination to the Japanese counterpart, and we could come up with some sort of formats or templates of command structures depending on missions. So that is my first point. And the second point is related to the Japanese side. Exactly yesterday, the Japanese Joint Operational Command was established. I visited the website of the JJOC, but it was not working, at least in today. Even though the JJOC was established, there's many uncertainty left right now, especially the relationship between the new JJOC and individual service commands of ground, maritime, and air self-defense forces is still uncertain because the roles of individual service commands do not seem to be changing, and maybe the new joint staff will need a new role, such as promulgating and establishing joint operational concepts and joint operational doctrines. So the demarcation between the JJOC and the joint staff seems to be straightforward, but in fact it would be very much complicated. And the third point is about the bilateral C2 relationship. The two countries have maintained separate parallel C2 relationship for almost 70 years. And the Japanese side already made it clear that the JSDF will not subordinate themselves to the US commander after the restructuring of both joint operational commands. But given the fast-paced operations surrounding Japan, including the joint targeting and standoff strikes. I think that maintaining too rigid command relationship would be contrary to increasing the effectiveness of bilateral operations. So what I propose here is to discuss some sort of templates of bilateral joint task forces comprised of parts of SDF units and parts of U.S. forces dedicated to specific missions, such as the operations near the Taiwan, operations related to the Korean Peninsula, and both sides can do the war games and the actual exercises to increase the preparedness for such prepared the bilateral joint task forces. So in conclusion, the both countries have many efforts in having material capabilities, including the weapons and organizational structures. But from now on, we should emphasize non-material factors such as C2 relationship, preparedness, preparing the joint operational doctrines. So I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ogi-san. This is extremely complicated issue, and now, unfortunately, became highly political charged in the eve of Secretary of Defense Hegseth's visit to Japan and Philippines next week. But this is really this really takes more of a cool-headed thinking through as both sides try to implement this plan. But last but not least, this is probably, at this day and age, where the Congress can help stabilize the situation. So Mizumi, tell us what you have.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm very privileged to have this opportunity to share my thoughts with you all. Honestly, so my topic is about Congress and U.S. Japan alliance. And it was a very challenging topic since whenever you turn on the TV, you listen to the podcast, you just keep hearing that it's constitutional crisis. But I think I got assigned to this topic because I think Yuki-san already mentioned, but I was a journalist before and I covered Japanese politicians for 5 years back in Tokyo. And also last year I had a very interesting opportunity to work at a House Foreign Affairs Committee as a fellowship program. And it was really interesting opportunity to kind of observe the difference of Japanese and American legislative process. People might ask like what Congress can do in foreign affairs, but actually it matters a lot. Looking back in the history, in 1960, a revised U.S.-Japan Security Treaty was ratified by Congress. It formalized U.S. commitment to defend Japan, and in return, Japan provide a base access and support. This was like a turning point for Japan. The agreement became the foundation for U.S. military to have a presence in Japan, and it has shaped the security landscape of the region ever since. And even today, Congress continues to play a critical role, like the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, provides funding for U.S. force based in Japan, and it maintains the readiness for the military to deter China, military rising China. But I find there's three challenges in this Congress and U.S.-Japan alliance. The three challenges, one is there is a growing gap between America and Japanese perspective on the alliance. Second, it's a policy swift between U.S. administration, making it very difficult to plan for the long-term U.S.-Japan coordination. And third, the two countries are lacking of shared and cohesive vision on how to approach China. So talking about alliance, actually American people and Japanese people seem to have a different way of looking at alliance nowadays. The recent poll was conducted in Japan last November. It shows that 95% of the Japanese believe that U.S.-Japan alliance is essential for peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific. But in contrast, in America, there's a poll conducted by Chicago Council of Global Affairs, shows that 43% of the American believes that U.S. should stay out of world affairs, one of the highest number in past 30 years. So this growing gap in public opinion is something we should pay attention to, and the American shifting inward side is starting to reflect in the American foreign policy, I think. The symbolic case is the USA withdrawal from Asia in the Pacific region, and that was really widely reported back in Japan, and it kind of draw a lot of concern from Japanese that what does this mean if America withdraw from this area? Is that going to bring the China filling the gap? And how is the power balance is going to shift in this area? So that kind of worry is still circling around. Second, the policy shift between U.S. administration making it difficult to plan for the long-term U.S.-Japan coordination. Mainly due to the polarization in Congress, it's more and more becoming difficult to find a middle ground in the Congress. So each time the new administration get elected, the policy will shift drastically. So every time the allies have to reassess their foreign policy towards the United States, the result is growing uncertainty and instability in long-term strategic planning. The third challenging, I think, is the two-country, US and Japan, lack of shared and cohesive vision on China policy. So the past 8 years, China policy was one of the rare area that bipartisan have a consensus on. But I feel like this is shifting recently, especially within the Republican Party. Some believe that US should work with allies to deter China. But some say we have to, the ally is a burden and needs to review the relationship. And some suggest that military power should be concentrated in the Indo-Pacific area, while some people support that American first principle, prioritizing domestic resource allocation. So this lack of clarity complicates Japanese role. Japan is closest US ally to Taiwan, located only 70 miles away, and Japan strongly needs to have a shared long-term strategy with US. So my policy recommendation is to help address these challenges. I propose stronger legislative diplomacy between United States Congress and the Japanese Diet. Because of US Congress holds a unique power. It has a power of purse, it has a power of oversight, and it has an ability to reach to the American people directly. So when executive policy becoming more and more unpredictable, I think it's time for Congress to stand up and fill in this, to take a role in here. By deepening ties between lawmakers in both countries, it can strengthen the policy continuity and reinforce the U.S.-Japan alliance of the future. Let me give you like 3 recommendations I have. One way I think is to achieve this by institutionalizing U.S.-Japan legislative exchange, moving from informal ad hoc visit to structured regular dialogue between U.S. and Japan lawmakers will strengthen long-term cooperation. Another step is the creation of U.S. Japan Congressional Working Group dedicated to strategic dialogue. Building on the existing institution like the Congress Study Group on Japan, this working group should bring together senior members of Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee from both countries. By fostering a direct discussion on regional security challenges, including potential Taiwan contingency, North Korean nuclear threats, and unified approach towards China. Both sides can get a common understanding of foreign policy objectives. Another recommendation is Congress should also leverage its budget authority to sustain and expand bipartisan congressional delegation and staff delegations. Enhancing direct engagement between U.S. lawmakers and key allies like Philippines, Japan, South Korea, and Australia is crucial. Beyond that, diplomatic benefits, bipartisan delegation allow lawmakers to develop shared understanding of regional security dynamics, and fostering cross-party cooperation that is essential for overcoming domestic political division. As I mentioned earlier, Congress is being tested right now, and with the executive branch policy becoming uncertain, legislative diplomacy must step up to provide stability and long-term continuity. Japan also cannot afford to see the U.S. withdraw from the Indo-Pacific region, and on this point, Japan must also be ready to step up, contribute more regional stability, and sharing a greater responsibility in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. As you can see, they had put a lot of thoughts into this effort and as they write policy memos. So Ogi-san's is, like I said, already is available online, and two Mizumi's and Haruka's are coming out shortly. So I do encourage all of you to go come back to our project website to check out for those. And I'm sure our wonderful communication team will push out those info as well as they become available. But with that, General.
First, thank you. As Yuki knows, I don't come to this impartially because I have 40 years of traveling to and living in Japan, so I'm not impartial. So this is a disclaimer up front. Here's why that's important, and I am very grateful for this morning. But I don't think you came to hear me. I think you came to hear them and ask them questions. But a couple thoughts based on the papers and some notes I just, as I listened to them, a couple thoughts. First, from my perspective, it's important. There's a common thread through here, a couple common threads, but the one that matters the most to me is the alliance. We can talk all around the periphery about how to improve it or change it or adjust it, but the centerpiece, the foundational element for me, is that alliance. Because if that didn't exist, we wouldn't probably even have the rest of these discussions. But we can take it for granted, is my point, and just kind of put it off to the side. We should never put it off to the side. It's a working alliance. It's not a static, good forever kind of piece of paper. It's like a wedding. It requires work all the time, like a marriage, right? I mean, marriages just don't go to the justice of the peace and you're good for 50 years. You have to work at it. Alliances are like a marriage.
Sometimes it's hard.
Sometimes it's hard. Absolutely. Yes. So I say that up front, just not to. I keep that always in the center. What is best for this alliance, and how do we keep it alive and relevant? A couple thoughts listening to the comments. The command and control part, which I'm very familiar with, and the birth of the Japanese Joint Operational Command, and also the restructuring, perhaps, of U.S. Forces Japan, which has been going on. That discussion is not new, as explained. This is not new. From my perspective, again, what is relevant is why this change was needed why did the discussion start in the first place? And I think there were probably a number of discussions, but the one that I recall is as China, the People's Republic of China grew, it was clear that if there was a conflict, we couldn't afford a major structure command change in the middle of that. Okay, so we have an administrative headquarters, have had one for a long time. It's not built to command and control. Tokyo is building their own, so we have a mismatch. That still exists. I believe that that's still the primary driver. But as we think our way through both commands, just a couple thoughts. One is the authorities of each matter. They're driven along national constitutional lines. They may not be identical, but they are very, very relevant because that's what empowers the people in those commands to make decisions and take action, if that makes sense. So the delegation of authorities from the national level down to that, what authorities they ultimately decide really, really matter. Here's how it can matter. If you divide time-wise between planning and deterrence, what happens day to day, and what happens in a conflict, there could be two different sets of authorities, conceivably, right? Many of your and my commands already have that, a difference. The key here is how fast can we transition? Because we assume that on the other side, whoever the adversary is, they're going to move quickly, and they're not going to take a pause while we make our commanded authorities adjustment. No, it's going to be quick. So we have to figure out how both countries can delegate one set of authorities day to day, and very quickly, whatever that takes, transition to what's a wartime set of authorities. Not an easy proposition. But the two time frames, the two phases are really important. And limiting the turbulence, the amount of change between the two can matter. And we got to practice that. Whenever we arrive at the solution, we got to practice, practice, practice in exercises. The alliance itself. Here, I focused in the second topic on economic security, which I believe has not been emphasized enough. I think we have focused on defense aspects of our national security, national securities, but not the economic aspects. Now I think it's coming clear that actually that's the backbone, and we really should focus on economic security. But here again, I would offer to you, there's not the only framework, not perhaps the best one, but there's national economic security. And then, as discussed, there's regional, collective economic security. And sometimes those priorities are different because just as on the military side, you may have to make some sacrifices. You may have to meet halfway on defense issues. You probably will have to do the same on economic issues. But preeminent to both countries always is, what are the national economic security issues at stake? How do we protect them? And then how far are we willing to compromise on a regional, collective economic security? That's very important. We don't have yet, this administration yet, a national security strategy, but you can assume there will come one, and then a national defense strategy and a national military strategy. All those will flow. They will look pretty familiar, I imagine. If we can get to a national economic strategy, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to that because one actually supports the other one. So I'm fascinated by the economic security part and the national part and the regional part and how do we weave them together? How willing are our two countries to compromise to reach both? Because I think they're both important. The role of Congress, fantastic topic. Fantastic topic. In foreign policy, more narrowly in foreign policy. Before we came in here, I shared just an observation that it's not a law, but during a transition in our country between administrations, there's a lot of jockeying for establishing who does what. we have a constitution, of course. We have title numbers that delineate responsibilities, but each administration comes in and tries to ensure they're carving out their authorities in the executive branch versus the legislative branch. That's what's happening now. It's not a good or a bad. It happens every 4 years. Sometimes more accentuated, sometimes you don't hear anything about it. It's definitely amplified right now. It's not a bad thing. What's important here is where they settle down on. I agree with the assessment that both have a role. The executive branch and the legislative branch have a role in executing foreign policy. But I think in this transition phase, as this administration gets its feet fully under it, I'm not surprised that they're asserting themselves. We have a Secretary of State. That's who's responsible. And it's true. But in the end, once the machine starts running, both have to operate in tandem. Where it can get sideways if they are not. And you touched on it. You didn't go into it. Not enough time here. But what if they're not? What if a congressional delegation goes to a country and is way off target from the administration? Now we're in a problem. We have a scene that can be exploited by that country or by our adversaries. So trying to align those two is really difficult. Both are important. When they work right, the congressional delegation can actually meet with people, ask questions, proffer ideas that maybe the executive branch doesn't want to right now. So both are valuable tools. But sometimes when they're not on the same page, it can get really messy. And then the other country is either, I'm not sure which message we're listening to, or they exploit it. Neither case is good. So I think all the dust will settle in a little bit. But right now, it's really, I agree with you, really difficult to get a read. So just an open question then. There's no surprises in what I just said, but fantastic papers and a great explanation you heard. And here's a question for any or all. Once the dust does settle on the command relationships of an operational command to Congress, to economic security, once all that is sort of where it's going to set, here's the hard part, I think, more difficult part. And this is where I'd love to hear your views. How do you communicate that? How do you communicate it internally to your own citizens? And how do you communicate it externally? And before you start, the magic of this is it certainly applies in deterrence, but it also applies in other areas. There's times when it pays to be very clear. Clarity matters. But there's times when countries are intentionally not clear, ambiguous. So I'm asking of you, if you were advising your national leaders, how do we communicate internally? And how do we communicate externally better to get to where we want to go?
Fantastic questions, but very difficult one. So I am going to, let's see. So everybody just assume for a second that you're a national security advisor to Prime Minister Ishiba.
Yeah. True.
As this deliberation goes on, as you watch across the Pacific and see also how U.S. administration also try to settle that dust, what are the top 3 things that you would emphasize to Prime Minister? So I think Ogi-san has an advantage of he's probably writing all your comments on the desk. So I'll go to you first, and then I will let Haruka and Mizumiru catch up.
Honestly speaking, I don't come up with 3 points. So I will come up consecutively. To the domestic public, the internal issue is relating to C2, U.S. bilateral C2, is that there's a long-standing concern and long-standing suspicion that the SDF will work under the U.S. forces. So that is there has been a political debate on that. So it's very difficult to totally eliminate this concern, of course. But as I described earlier, and also in the commentary, and also as General Berger indicated, we have common security concerns and security threats, and the increasing the effectiveness of our military operations directly benefit our national interest, and including the territorial defense and the protection of the Japanese citizens. So may not be effective for somebody, but it's really important to constantly remind of this severe fact. Without the Japan's own effort or the effort in aligned with the U.S. assistance and U.S. effort, it is always impossible and hard to secure the Japanese defense and Japanese stability. So that is the only rationale we have, and the emphasizing this fact is the only solution. And on the other hand, keeping some sort of ambiguity to the external concerns, such as China, is also important. Clarifying too much about our joint coordination and joint planning would help our security threats to prepare for that. So we always have this very delicate balance between persuading our own citizens and keeping strategic ambiguity about our options. So I don't come up with a magic solution, but I just want to highlight this trade-off. And also, we can come up with creative solutions. So everyone in Japan, maybe many people in Japan, misunderstand that the Japanese constitution prohibits Japan from joining the multilateral force or being under the some sort of control of other countries' commander, because the Japanese constitution doesn't prohibit directly it. The Japan already 10 years ago participated in multinational forces about counter-piracy, CDF 151. So I personally was involved in that effort, and we just come up with the solution that there is a softer form of C2, which is equivalent of just coordination and the concerted coordination was happening in CDF 151. So we can come up with some sort of solutions, creative solutions to break through the legal limits of the Japanese constitution, and also can persuade the Japanese public for the sake of enhanced military effectiveness to cope with our security threats.
Great. Thank you, Ogi-san. Maybe Mizumi next.
Okay. I would say to Prime Minister Ishiba, don't wait till the dust will settle. Right? You have to be proactive, especially if I think it's very difficult to understand what each decision means in I think, the current administration. So the most important thing right now is to bring America attention to the Indo-Pacific. Some people were saying, like, originally, oh, Japan didn't cut in the radar. Oh, thank God, like, we won't be attacked by Donald Trump, president. But I think it's not wise to be not caught in the radar and not being paid attention at all. I think what Japan should do is like prove themselves. Like they have a long history of supporting Asian country, giving the ODA, and have a people-to-people relation. That kind of thing, I think Japan can present and help with bridging U.S. and those countries. Also, try to bring America into Japan ROK trilateral meeting, which is now all the leader has left from the Camp Davis summit. So I think Japan could be there's many roles that Japan can play as a bridge in this area, I think.
Thank you. Haruka.
Yes. Also, the general also mentioned like how much the economic sector is really important. Maybe that is one of the things that we can just like more focus on, or kind of shift it not too much security, but also economic security, also a very significant sector for the U.S. Japan and also in the Pacific area. The second part is also as Ms. also mentioned, like how much Japan kind of bring in attentions of the importance of the Pacific to the U.S. and how much the U.S.-Japan alliance is very kind of important and based on very kind of longer history. And then also these two nations kind of alliances can also strengthen the alliances on the ASEAN countries and how much these multilateralism is very important, but also bilateral kind of importance of the simultaneously, especially under the current administration.
Great, thank you all for those thoughts. Then I will open up the question with the general audience, but it's already several already coming in, so I'm just going to start hitting it. So, first one is going to go to Mizumi, or proactive, to engage with the Republican-led current Congress. Which topics would Japan may have a comparative advantage of engaging them on?
Oh, thank you very much for that question. It's really a kind of difficult question, but well, first thing I could say is keep the connection. But like to have a same topic or working group kind of style of meeting and just talk really more intensively on a topic. I think Japan has a leverage. As I said, Japan has a long, good relationship with Asian country. Japan is giving a lot of Coast Guard capacity building to the Philippines and Vietnam. I think these are things which is very interesting for Congress as well. They have a lot of diaspora from Vietnam and Philippines in America. There are their constituent. So that kind of topic, maybe they can consult and talk about it.
Perfect, thank you. Next one is, I think, Dave, do you have anything to add to that one? Okay.
Great.
So next one is more about the overall alliance relationships. So both President Trump and Prime Minister Ishiba, in their own context, have mentioned about the asymmetrical alliance relationships. I think this may be the question more for Haruka and Hirohito, but Mizumi, feel free to chime in. How then, if that were really kind of the perception that our current leaders have in both countries, how then should this alliance be recalibrated, if necessary at all? So I'll start with Haruka maybe, and then follow with Aoki-san.
Yes, so I think as long as it's my research, so Prime Minister Ishiba perception is more focused on defense side. He has very kind of strong defense background, and he also 3 days ago he also visited the military academy in Japan at the graduation ceremony, and he mentioned how much the deterrence power is very important in the Pacific region. So I also looking forward to see like more like concrete of his policy, especially in the foreign policy on the security sector. And as for the Trump administrations, I personally is more focused on the especially economic security parts, especially on tariff policy. That is maybe one of the major concern in Japan too. And there's so much uncertainty still existed, and yes, but I was just like how much like these their own kind of national interests, their own administration interests going to be kind of matches, and how could they kind of seeking for the mutual understanding and information transparency. That is what I think.
Thank you. Ogi-san, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Haruka-san's comment about the mutual interest convergence. So, of course, the bilateral alliance has a lot of symmetry, and it's a very unique treaty alliance, but interest convergence matters more than the alliance structure. And honestly speaking, the Prime Minister Ishiba's statement, view about his statement to renew the asymmetrical structure doesn't have the strong, robust support in Japan. I think strengthening the alliance based on the current structure has much support, more support than his own unique view. So I think in the Japanese side, they're not so much serious problem, and the more serious the security environment surrounding Japan is, the Japanese people, most of the Japanese people are sensing the growing necessity to coordinate with the U.S. government and as well as U.S. forces. So there are not so much problem. I think the more concern is the U.S. side and the argument about what is the U.S. interest. Recently, the famous scholar Stephen Rosen, the published very much surprising article in Foreign Affairs that U.S. forward deployed forces do not benefit much the U.S. for the U.S. national interest. I think that would undermine the fundamental interest convergence between the two countries. So I personally, I'm very much concerned about whether or not this sort of argument will have a dominant view in the U.S. policy and strategic community. So we need to address this matter as soon as possible.
I would, if Dave does have additional thoughts, I would ask you to hold your thought a little bit, because next question, I'm going to come to Ogi-san first, but that is really kind of, people try to ask you questions, Dave, let's face it. But I'm just going to try to, first I try to go to Ogi-san, because that is really about kind of very closely related to what he wrote. So two-part question. First, what do you see as the biggest hurdle for greater and deeper interoperability between U.S. and Japanese forces? And how, and this is from here, is a question part two, is how might they be overcome as individual service components try to improve their tactical level cooperative relationship as the political, polymer sides work through structural barriers that you laid out, such as joint C2, shared training, and then other stuff like shared training sites, potential public opposition to expansion of that kind of a tangible defense cooperation, and more standardized joint tactics, techniques, and procedures. So very loaded two-part question, but.
Yeah, the first question during the first question the video was frozen. So could you repeat the first bit?
Right. So our first question was, what do you think is the greatest obstacle in between the two forces for greater interoperability? And then how they might be overcome as, and then you heard the part two of my question, right?
Oh yeah. There are many obstacles in my opinion. The biggest one is, of course, the Japanese Constitution, and more precisely speaking, the people's perception about the Japanese Constitution. So many people want to keep some buffer zone, safer zone from the really the clear line the Constitution prohibits or permits. So there's a kind of a political, legal self-restraint in the Japanese side to not to increase or enhance the interoperability issues. And also, I think in the Japanese side, there are long-standing separate organizational cultures. Honestly speaking, of the individual services of the self-defense forces. It partly has been because of the lack of the actual combat access for the JSDF, because if the war happens, the joint operations are necessary, and increasing interoperability is a must. So Japan has had a luxury for a long time, keeping away from increasing interoperability and increasing jointness within the SDF. So that has to be changed, and naturally speaking, that as security threats surrounding Japan will get more severe.
Dave, do you have an additional thought on this? I bet you do.
Just quick. I won't take much time. I think I tried to separate the policy parts from the question is about interoperability. And here I would offer to you, don't confuse interoperability, the ability of military units to work together, to operate together, with integration, which is trying to mash them into a single unit with a single chain of command, which can happen too, but it's not the same. At this stage, the focus is on interoperability. Maybe down the road, integration, but those are national decisions. It should not slow us down, is my point. And I think there's a lot of focus always on the technical aspects of interoperability. My radios can't talk to yours. My networks won't communicate with yours, and those are all true. They can also, I've over and over again seen units work their way right through them at the tactical level. Good commanders will not let that stop training. They won't go home and say, we can't do. They figure it out, and they work their way through it. And then they tell their chains of command, we need to fix this because I can't pass information rapidly enough the way it is now, so we have to fix this network problem. So I think it's workable at the tactical level. And we should not wait for policy decisions on integration, which may or may not happen. That should not slow us down, should not stop us. How do you work your way through it? Co-location, somebody mentioned, absolutely. Any two units that are stationed together are going to work together, are going to train together, and also they're going to socialize together. Huge aspect of this. Because if he and I or she and I live on the same base, we see each other, we're going to actually get to a deeper level of understanding which will pay off when we're in the field or on ship. So co-location really is good. And also is training. And in the past 5 years, I've really marveled at Japan's willingness and willingness to pay to train with the U.S. and others in the Philippines and Australia. This is great. Great for a lot of reasons. Not just the interoperability, but it's the visibility of Japan working with other militaries outside the 12 nautical miles. It's really good to see. Asymmetric, just real quickly. I don't know how you define that word. If you're a global leader, there is going to be asymmetry. So why are we surprised about it? Why are people asking about it? Or you don't want to be a global leader, and then maybe we're symmetric. But I don't think anybody in the U.S. is willing to say, well, let's just be symmetric with everybody. So I'm not all that hung up on the asymmetry part. I think there is an economic aspect, there's a military aspect of asymmetry. But I think in the end, it seems to me that what the U.S. is trying to do is, it's not a dollar amount or the number of soldiers or ships. It's, are they doing all they can, proportional to us, to protect themselves? Or are we contributing more than they are? Do we care more than they are? Okay, that's a fair question to ask of anybody. So it's more proportion. It's not an absolute amount. Asymmetry should be, we're willing to protect ourselves and contribute equally to this collective security. And if a country's not, why not? Because somebody else then is pitching in on their behalf. Those are fair questions. But asymmetry's been around for 70 years. You have to get within the definition. What are we actually talking about?
Thank you for your thoughts. So, Haruka, since I asked you to write about the global context and the U.S.-Japan alliance global context, I think this one is a good one for you. When we talk about Indo-Pacific, and we hear from everybody, and most questions have really focused on Quad, Taiwan, more East China Sea, South China Sea. But what can Japan and U.S. do better to engage Pacific Island countries to maintain their relationship with U.S. and Japan, as China, as we know, increases their ventures, investment, economic assistance and development assistance, so forth in the region. So I'll start that with you.
That's great. Thank you so much for the questions. In this paper, I just also focus on not only the Pacific, but more regional focus, including Pacific Islands. Especially what I just searches is especially more kind of disaster cooperations or more kind of energy investment that we can just maybe kind of share between Pacific Islands and also the U.S. and also Japan. Also including the economic sector, more kind of dependence from the kind of China on the economic sector. Maybe U.S. and Japan can have more kind of joint kind of dialogue with them, and have more kind of practical kind of joining kind of program in these sectors, to strengthen these alliances, and how much these two nations they kind of support them, and vice versa. But these kind of, for example, energy sector, green energy, especially more economic investment that we can just we can share as a kind of mutual understanding.
Can I add some?
Yeah, of
few
course.
words? So Congressman Amibera last year went to Pacific Island, a few areas, and also Kurt Campbell visited those places. So more and more American realizing these are such an important place, and China is gearing up, try to give an influence to these areas. And actually it doesn't really cost that much money to to support these places, like drawing the undersea cables or disaster. Some places going under the sea levels, there's a lot of needs, which doesn't cost too much and can give a huge influence to these areas. So I think it's really good to bring in Japan, bring in Australia, and collaborate together and just make a presence. America is committed to this place and engage. I think it really sends out a good message to this area.
Thank you. And your thought? Anything?
Just
that you would
a
like to add?
different way to look at it. And in the spirit of SITES being self-critical, sometimes a global leader can be, this is a powerful word, probably too much, arrogant in thinking that we are the best ones to lead everywhere in all things. Not the case at all. We should be more humble. And here's what I mean. The question had to do with engagement in other Pacific nations. My learning over time is if you're humble enough to take a step back, actually other countries are in many cases better suited economically, culturally, long-term relations than we are to take the lead. So the key here, I think, is an open, frank discussion between countries and rationally going through this country. Who's best to take the lead? Who can be a partner? The other one can follow, and being reasonable about that instead of we're bigger, so we're going to go in first and talk the loudest. Just actually, many countries, I think Japan will be a better first partner. The U.S. would be also there. But that doesn't mean we actually have to break the door in and be the loudest voice in the room. And I'm making fun of it, but sometimes that's how we're perceived. Actually, we should rationally, unemotionally look who has the closer ties, the longer ties. Or actually on an individual basis with a minister. Maybe Japan, this is a 20-year relationship. Why would we not capitalize on that? But it requires humility.
That's an important perspective, actually, because we often talk about that in the context of Southeast Asia engagement. So yeah, that is a great point that you brought up. Two questions. Those are both Congress related, so I'm going to combine them all together and put it in Mizumi. But partly, I might turn to Dave for his additional thoughts. So you talked about the enduring, more of a lasting, structural, institutional, parliamentary level engagement between U.S. and Japan. And obviously, there are some cultural differences between two countries. So what are some of the things that you would think that the U.S. members of the Congress have to be mindful when they communicate with their Japanese counterpart? That's one question. And on your times on the Hill, have you seen the kind of implicit, often not visible, but still very important role that the veterans play? Military veterans, because they're the one actually when it comes to issues like U.S. Japan. They have served in Japan. Dave mentioned it too. They worked with Japanese counterpart. A lot of them come home with a very positive experience in that, and that can be the untapped, powerful advocates for the alliance. So the question number 2 for you is, have you actually seen that at work while your time on the Hill?
The first question is culture difference between Japan. Well, I think it's it's really interesting question because every time when Japanese policymakers delegation come over, they will start with exchanging the name card, and because American politicians maybe not so familiar with this kind of exchanging name card custom. So they sometimes they didn't have the name card with them and just shake hand. But well, there's definitely a huge difference. That's a very small things, but here and there there's some. But I think Japan can really learn from how Korean delegation, Korean politicians accessing to Japan. They're very active, and maybe it comes from the joint command they have, or like mil-mil relationship. They fought together. I don't know what is that behind, but like they're more vocal. That's my that's what I observed while I was in Congress, and I thought there's a lot of stuff we can learn from the Korean way of accessing. Even Japan is America and Japan is like really rock solid relationship, but I think Japan also has to be more hungry with this and be more vocal. And just don't be too polite every time. You have to say whatever your concern and be straightforward, because sometimes Japanese try to be humble and not be polite to the other side and wouldn't say what they have to say in the front, but just say it in the very end. But it doesn't work that way in American way of thinking. So that's something I think I can say about. And veterans, I've seen such a strong voice. They've always been very vocal in Congress, and they lobbying a lot, which I think it's really important because there's so many industry tapped into the veterans, and the service they are giving to America is something we really have to respect, and a lot of bills has to protect those veterans. So I think I observed a lot of veterans walking around in Congress, Capitol Hill, and I think it was a really good, healthy communication. Yeah.
So Dave, veteran yourself, any thoughts on how veteran can be also the powerful resources as an advocate for the alliance, more to the grassroots level now that, once they're out of the uniform and go on to their second career?
Certainly through the business side. The ones that go into business outside the U.S. or deal internationally, that's where it's going to very much help. They are hopefully active with their local members to educate them, because other people in the community that become elected officials are not going to have that understanding at all. And the military members, if we're proactive, can help them as they step up and are elected, how to act. To your point, the first question, how to act, how to engage. It's not easy, as you well know, going to another country and another country and another country that are very different. And if you put yourself in the senators, congressmen's shoes for a moment, they go to Australia, and after 15 seconds, the Australians are like, get to it. They just yell at you like, say what you mean. And then you go to Japan, and they avoid confrontation always in public. And if you try the Australian approach there, they're taken aback, and it doesn't go well. I contrast that because, to her point, there is a key to that, unlocking that. In my experience, it is the country team, the embassy. And more specifically, the Japanese employees at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. If your first stop is there, they'll give you all the advice that you need. If you make appointments on your own and then talk to the embassy afterwards, you'll wonder why nobody talked to you, or they were whatever. Well, if you'd have stopped at the embassy first, people there will coach you on how there, in that country, how cultures work that are different perhaps than yours, and you'll be off to a great start. But not all, I don't know about your experience, not all congressional delegations have the first meeting as with the embassy and the embassy team, and just listen, ask questions. Don't talk, just listen, ask questions. They will coach you. Mike, I don't know about your observation.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because you're there to understand the local people's needs. So it's not there to just say what you want to say. It's more about understanding the region. So I totally agree with your perspective.
So on the flip side of the coin, Ogi-san, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You've been probably in the position when you were in the government to have to prep those visiting Japanese Diet members that are heading to foreign countries for a visit. Any thoughts on how Japan side could also prep them better prior to their departure, before they get on the plane?
Yeah. Of course, being more active is very much important aspect. But at the same time, I think that the most Japanese people, including some politicians, might have the thinking that the making a really strong argument and pushing their counterparts is always a virtue, because that is contrary to the Japanese, traditional Japanese image. I personally think that doesn't work in some cases. So just enhancing the good aspect of the Japanese communication sometimes works better to their foreign counterparts, because they already know how the Japanese are communicating with their foreign counterparts in a friendly setting. So striking a balance is always important.
Seems to be the key word here, balance and alliance. With that, I think we are right on the 10:30 dot. So thank you all for very good questions. I am proud of myself. I went through most of the questions in this short amount of time. But most of all, I would like to thank everyone who joined here in the speaking part, as well as who join us in person from first thing morning, as well as those who join online. So thank you for your participation. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I will conclude the session now. Thank you.